Good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon session of the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of July 11th, 2023. This meeting is held in person, but it is also being held via Zoom for any participants who would like to participate remotely. And you can do that so by joining the meeting at the estimated time shown on the agenda for the item that you're interested in. And that agenda can be found on our website. And if you'd just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so on YouTube at our YouTube channel. And with that, I'll turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through the afternoon agenda.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. We'll begin with public hearing item number 4, LPC 23-04641, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 236, Lot 52, 30 College Place in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This is a brick carriage house, and the application is to construct a rooftop addition, modify the rear facade, and excavate the cellar.
Hello, my name is Mark Berg. I'm a principal at DTLS Architecture. Thank you for your time, and we'll get started. The project is located at 30 College Place in Brooklyn Heights. It's in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, Community Board 2. Last month, we presented and received approval from the Community Board. Looking at the project, we wanted to show you some historic images. The first one we could find was 1941, and the image on the upper right is the current state of the carriage house. To give you some context, College Place is a dead-end street. The access is from the south. Our house is on the north side of the street, and there's 4 similar homes in the that were built in the same time period as carriage houses. At certain points in the past, they were auto body shops. Looking at some of the images, it's a street, so it's mostly visible when you're on the north side. It's also slightly visible when you're looking at it from Love Lane. On the adjacent streets of Hicks and on Henry, it's not visible because it's obscured by some adjacent buildings. When you start to look at the building, the front facade and the rear facade are all in various states of change over the course of the life of the building. It was built in 1899, so there have been some modifications. Here's some views of the roof. This is one of the areas that we'll be talking about in the presentation. You can also see that to the north, 2 of the similar carriage houses have built additions. Looking at the front facade, there's some historic details, but looking at the 1941 photograph, our intention is to bring it back to the original state. We're going to try to restore any of the existing doors. We'll also be doing any sort of clean work to the brick, replacing the windows, all of which will be done in coordination with our staff member as we go through the process. I also wanted to stop on this image to show how there will be a 3rd floor addition. It's important to note that it is not visible from any street. We're also proposing some changes to the rear of the house. There's a very narrow backyard. It's only about 8 feet deep, but it's important to see how it would be affecting some of the adjacent buildings since it's such a narrow backyard. We already have staff member approval for the ground floor. We will be enlarging some of the windows, making easier access for the door. On the 2nd floor, we're going to be reconfiguring the windows to better suit the bedrooms. On the proposed addition, we'll be adding a door and a window facing the rear. When you look at the 4 brownstones, you can see that there's been some modifications to the rear on each of them. Specifically, when you look at the buildings on either side of ours, you can see that there have been adjustments to the top floor and bottom floor windows. Our intention with our proposal is to keep some of the existing geometry for the height of the sills and the headers, but also allow for better light and air for the bedrooms behind them. Since the backyard isn't very deep, we did our best to get photos of the adjacent buildings, but we had to rely on Google Earth to photograph the aerial view. And you can see the 4 homes on the lower right-hand side. We wanted to walk you through the house. One of the items that we're going to discuss is the expansion of the existing cellar. We plan to take over the entire footprint of the building for the cellar and also create a convenience stair that will connect to the main floor. Moving up to the ground floor, you can see that we're opening up the rear wall to get more light and air into the main living room. The next floor up is primarily going to be used for bedrooms. If you look towards the rear of the house, you'll see that having a new window configuration better suits the floor plan. But you'll also notice that in the front, we gave priority to the existing window configuration. So one of the bedrooms is larger than the other. The top floor will be a primary bedroom suite. There's a couple of items I wanted to point out. The front terrace will not be used for occupiable space, so that eliminates the need for any guardrails. The rear will have some exterior occupiable space, but the guardrails will not be visible from the street. We went through great pains in the design of the mechanical system to move all of the utilities to the back of the building so they won't be visible from the street, and we can elaborate on that in a moment. Looking at the house in 3D, you can see that we pulled the house back, but we also went through some pains to make sure that we could minimize any visibility by changing the slope of the addition so that it slopes towards the front of the site. In doing so, it made sure that all of the high point, which is at about 11'3", is in the rear. To test our design, we prepared a full-size mock-up, which has been erected for about a month. It's also still visible today. We not only built the actual addition height, but also the height of all the mechanical equipment. We wanted to include some context photos, as well as some images from the top of the roof. As you look at the lower right-hand corner, you can see that none of the addition or the mechanical work is visible from the street. Looking at some more context images, you can see that even as you move north on College, it's still not visible. We also walked up and down Henry Street just to confirm that none of the addition would be visible. It's all going to be obscured by the adjacent buildings. Just as a formality, we wanted to document that everything that was built in the mock-up was to scale based on our architecture and engineering drawings. So everything was double checked and confirmed. We also had our landmark staff member come and view the installation to confirm that everything was not visible from the street. These are just some general images to show how everything kind of scaled out, including some of the pipes and mechanical equipment. Alongside the physical mock-up, we prepared a digital design so that we could confirm that none of these interventions would be visible from the street. This was generated in 3D using the appropriate heights for all the adjacent buildings. And we prepared a section from across the street. All of the new addition and mechanical equipment is concealed by the existing cornice. Jumping into just a little bit of detail, when it comes to the expansion of the cellar, we've explored two different strategies with our geotechnical and structural engineer. One would be involving underpinning along the party line, the party walls, which is the image on the left. And then we also developed a second strategy where the new foundation and retaining wall was inset in our property by 3 feet so that we wouldn't have any interference with the neighboring buildings. And just a little bit of confirmation on the level of detailing. We'll be using green trays for the front terrace. It adds 2.5 inches to the top of the roof, none of which is visible from the street. And then just to confirm that any replacement windows will be matching to the 1941 historic photograph. So with that, I wanted to thank you again for letting us present our project to you. And if you have any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Ginsburg.
Even though the front terrace up at the top won't be usable, I think you need a guardrail there, which would be probably visible, or have you looked at that?
Yeah, we've already been working with our initial DOB filing package, and we got a first round of comments back. And since it's just going to be a mechanical space that doesn't actually have any equipment, you're not required to have a handrail in the same regard that you don't have to have a handrail around the mechanical.
I would suggest you check the code. I think it requires above 22 feet. It's either 20 or 22 feet. You have a parapet or railing of 42 inches. And it doesn't differentiate between occupied and unoccupied. So that's just something you should work out, and you may have to work out with staff. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? All right, not seeing any questions, we'll move to public testimony. And I'll first ask if there's anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this item. All right, not seeing anyone present who wishes to testify, I'll turn it over to Gregory Kahlo, who can let us know if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups beforehand, so we'll be hearing from those people first. The first signup we'll be hearing from is Judy Stanton from the Brooklyn Heights Association. So Judy Stanton, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please state your name for the record and unmute your line, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Judy Stanton, speaking for the Brooklyn Heights Association. We support this application as presented. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from John Graham from the Victorian Society in New York. So John Graham, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. It appears the rooftop addition will not be visible from a public place, and there are already rooftop additions on 2 of the 4 carriage houses in this row. We therefore are not opposed to this addition. The changes to the intact rear facade are unfortunate, and we suggest that at least the historic second floor window openings remain, but we recognize that the rear yards of these carriage houses are tiny, and the large window openings proposed may provide some compensation for that. We do, however, have serious concerns about the work proposed for the front of the house. This work is described in the presentation materials, though apparently is not proposed to be discussed by the commissioners. We assume this is because it is to be approved at staff level. We studied the presentation material as well as the tax photos for the entire row, and we went to the site. The work would remove a great deal of historic material from the front of the building. This includes all the 2/2 wood windows, the hinged shutters, the main entrance door with its charming etched glass transom, and the loft door on the second floor. All this material is exactly as it appears in the 1939 tax photo. The main entrance door is old and matches exactly the old doors on 2 other buildings in the row. The second floor door is all different in detail, but this one is old. The windows are old construction. In this house, they have newer replacement glass, but the identical windows with old cylinder glass remain next door. The etched glass in the transom is of unknown date, but is puttied into the old wood transom. Shutters remained on 2 of the houses in 1939, this one and number 28 next door. The shutters on number 28 were subsequently replaced, leaving the shutters on number 30, the last historic shutters on the row. If the Commission's rules allow staff approval for all this historic material to be trashed, or worse, if the rules mandate that staff approve such work, then there is something very wrong with the rules and they should be changed. After all, preservation of the historic fabric of our designated buildings is one of the main purposes of the Landmarks Commission. Finally, I'd like to thank the applicant for a very concise and informative presentation. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please state your name for the record and unmute your line, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds the proposed changes to the second floor fenestration on the rear facade to be inappropriate. We support the Commission's general precedent that the original 3 masonry openings on the top floor of a rear facade should be maintained, along with the crenellated brick cornice. Unfortunately, the proposed rooftop addition lacks sufficient detail for us to determine whether or not it is appropriate. That said, we are concerned that the addition is not set back far enough from the front facade, and we feel that perhaps it should align with the previously constructed rooftop addition on the adjacent property. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Stanley Kupfer. So Stanley Kupfer, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Stanley Kupfer. I'm an attorney. I represent Robert Iannucci, who is the owner of 28 College Place and the adjacent house in the row. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the commission. My client has asked me to participate in this meeting today to relay that at this point, they're unable to endorse this proposal, as there are serious concerns that remain to be addressed in the nature of the work, particularly with respect to the basement and the party wall in either of the 2 scenarios that were proposed today, as well as some of the comments made by a prior speaker with respect to the removal of historical materials at the front of the premises. I was also asked to remind the commission that there is not yet any type of access agreement in place, and that there is ongoing discussion and study of proposed materials between the parties. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking through the attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommends conditional approval, asking the applicant to work with LPC to create a construction protection plan that encompasses additional monitoring for the neighbors, inclusive of a minimum 50-foot radius. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Great. Thank you very much, Gregory. And I'm going to turn to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond. But before we do that, I just want to turn to Corey Harala. We heard some comments about the work being proposed at the front facade and how that conforms to the LPC rules for staff level approval. So Corey, if you want to just address that quickly.
Yes, and the applicant may add more to this as well. But in general, what's in the presentation materials is focused on the commission level work. In some cases, there are other work items that would qualify for staff level review also on those drawing pages. But it should be known that those are not always complete. And in this case, I think the staff is still working with the applicant to determine which of the various architectural features may need to be repaired versus replaced. But the staff level rules do allow for deteriorated features to be replaced, typically in kind, sometimes with substitute materials, depending on what it is. But in this case, we haven't gotten to that point yet, and it's still under review. So that would apply to the windows, doors, and shutters that were raised in the testimony.
Okay, great. So if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard about the addition, the window modifications on the rear, and I think there's concerns about the excavation.
Well, I would like to reiterate what Corey was saying. We've had a really productive working relationship with our LPC staff member, and anything in the front facade that can be restored, our client is committed to restoring. He also is present here just to confirm that. In regards to some of the other comments, these are part of an ongoing discussion in regards to the rear. Let me see if I can get this guy to come back. Regarding the rear facade, there we go. Let's go back quickly. We wanted to create a more balanced harmony for the 2 bedrooms that face the rear. By doing so, that meant that we would be splitting the wall right through one of the existing windows. I know this is a common practice in Brooklyn where brownstones don't have perfectly symmetrical rear facades, but we felt that it was a good opportunity for us to create a higher quality of space. And also, when we look at the adjacent buildings, there have already been substantial modifications to all the other facades. What we did want to try to do was pick up on some of the traditional cues, such as the height of the sill, so that at least there'd be some sort of relationship with the neighboring buildings. And the other thing that we were trying to do was match a little bit of the proportions so that if somebody was sitting within their backyard, everything had a certain amount of proportion that we were going for. In regards to some of the other comments, while I appreciate the lawyer's comments regarding the excavation, this has been part of a year-long discussion. And what's really surprising to me is that during our community board 2 hearing, he said it was a site safety issue. And it seems that he's changed his tune to now talking about excavation. That's why we took the time to prepare 2 different schemes working with a geotechnical and structural engineer, one that would be built completely within our property. I would encourage the lawyer who's still on the call to entertain our site safety plan, which they've had for a number of months, and work with us to create something that's best for not just their building, but for the entire community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, let's move to close our hearing. Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. The commission has a number of carriage houses that are designated both as individual landmarks and within historic districts. And certainly Brooklyn Heights is a neighborhood that has a number of carriage houses. And over the years, the commission has, historically carriage houses we know have undergone changes as uses have changed and they've been adaptively used. And certainly those that are designated also, we have approved changes to allow for new uses and most commonly residential uses. And that's true for both our individually designated as well as our carriage houses that are within historic districts. And we've been actually fairly flexible at the rear facades, including cutting them back to create a required 30-foot rear yard and doing a new rear facade, rooftop additions that wrap around. This particular one is part of a row. And so it's been raised in testimony that we should think about the row the way we do with the top floor of window openings in row houses. And that's something that you all can think about as we have our discussion. The rooftop addition as represented is not visible from a public way. And I think that they've addressed their proposal for the excavation. So we'll begin our discussion and we'll start with our resident of Brooklyn Heights, Commissioner Vice Chair Bland.
Here I go again. I'm sorry to say, I know this building, but not only do I live in the corner for 51 years, but I parked my car at number 20 for over 30 years, and it's an identical building to this until I was kicked out. These people actually wanted to live in it rather than have my car parked in it. I thought that was outrageous, but I had to accept it and move on. I think this is, I'm glad to hear the follow-up with the architect here and Corey with regard to the work on the front. Because I was also going to ask, why didn't we hear more about that? And now I understand why. But I think what you've said on the public record, that the owner and wish to, and working with Corey and staff are willing to repair anything that's reparable as opposed to replacing it. I think that was good to hear. The invisibility of the issue and so forth, I think is clear, appropriate. So the issue is in the back, and those little yards are teeny. They are minute, and it's not visible from any public way, and probably from many people as well. Probably can't see anything here. They've already been changed, as was noted. The windows, that is, on the second floor have been changed on many of them already, or at least on some of them. I've forgotten how many. So I have no objection with these changes that are being made to get more light and air into what is now a habitable space and a better habitable space, I will say. So to me, that was the only potentially controversial issue, and it's not for me. I think it's appropriate.
Commissioner Chen.
I agree.
Okay. Commissioner Ginsburg,
I also agree.
Commissioner Goldblum.
I do agree as well, although I do think the rear windows should be punch windows instead of two strips. I think they could do 4 punches. It doesn't have to be literally what it was, but I think the strips with the casements just looks off to me.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate in most respects. It would be nice if something could be done to the windows to bring them more in line with the existing the row of windows.
So to do a sort of punched openings.
Yeah.
Commissioner Master.
I'm going to agree with our resident Brooklyn Heights expert, Commissioner Bland.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson.
I think these little buildings are so beautiful. When I lived in Brooklyn, passing by them, and they're elegant and simple. And I think everything is fine. I can approve it except for the back facade. I think it should be restudied and not have that many windows or one big window or something.
Okay.
Just
So,
simplify.
to do punched window openings. So Vice Chair Bland, would you be comfortable doing Commissioner Lafayette, I thought it was beside the table. Forgive me.
Also a Brooklyn person. So I do want to say that not only did I think your presentation was good, but and I know we're not talking about the interior of the house, but very efficiently laid out. I think this is a terrific project, and I'm glad that there is going to be a lot of attention paid to the facade. And I also happen to agree with Michael and Diana that punched openings would be good on the back.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So Vice Chair Bland, I know you supported it as is, but would you be comfortable just making a recommendation that they work with staff to do punched openings? Yeah.
Sure. Well, we haven't heard me read a nomination in a long time, but I guess I'm forced to now. In the matter of LPC -23-04641, 30 College Place in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This is an application to construct a rooftop addition, modify the roof facade, and excavate the cellar. I recommend, I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed rooftop addition will not be visible from a public thoroughfare, and will be set back from the front and rear facades to maintain the original form of the building. That the design and materiality of the rooftop addition, featuring brick facades and punched window and door openings, will be in keeping with the character of other rooftop additions within the historic district. That the modifications of the window openings at the top floor of the rear facade, retaining the outer piers and matching the existing height, while expanding horizontally for the installation of casement windows, will not be in keeping, and will be working with staff, will have punch window openings instead. And that the proposed excavation work will allow for the full cellar and will occur within the footprint of the existing building, and that the excavation and any necessary underpinning will be done in compliance with the Department of Buildings regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect the building's facade and the adjacent buildings. Yes.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
I sorry.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye. Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so it's approved with that modification. Please continue to work with the staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, we'll move to the next item.
All right, the next item is public hearing item number 5, LPC 22-05952, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1951, lot 30, 302 Grand Avenue in the Clinton Hill Historic District. The site is currently 2 vacant lots. The application is to construct 2 new buildings and create a curb cut.
Is everything on
It's not showing. No, but this is not how the dimensions are not like that.
Edith, could you bring up the presentation for 302 Grand Avenue? We're still on 30 College. Thank you.
Center.
So here's that worksheet, and that's the base.
Okay. This is the cue.
Yeah, like that, and also stay at 8.
Okay. My name is Nikolai Katz and Krista Jermadash is remote, I believe. We are presenting 2 new single-family homes located on an empty lot on the corner of Clifton Place and Grand Avenue in the Clinton Hill Historic District. 50 Clifton Place to the right is a 3-story with a basement that ends the very typical block of row houses on Clifton Place between Grand Avenue and St. James Place. 302 Grand Avenue to the left is also a 3-story building with a cellar that sits nearly mid-block on a more commercial street. These are the Sanborn maps of 1887 and 1904. Both show that the corner lot is vacant. The 45 by 100 zoning lot is divided into 3 separate lots. The existing 3-story house at 48 Clifton Place, built in 1905, has a lot of 20 by 100. The tax lot for 50 Clifton Place is 25 by 45. It is a corner building with an entrance on Clifton Place. The tax lot for 302 Grand is 25 feet by 50 feet with an entrance on Grand Avenue and has a single surface parking space in the courtyard. This is the eastern boundary of Clinton Hill Historic District. The buildings across Grand Avenue do not fall into the historic district except for the corner building at Grand Avenue and Green. Clifton Place from Grand Avenue to St. James Place is a typical Brooklyn row house block. All are brownstone with a mixture of 2, 3, and 4-story buildings. The buildings are all residential and have The typical features of stoops, front gardens with metal railings, large front doors, metal parapets, and stylized lintels above the doors and windows. Details along the Clifton Place block vary a lot from house to house. As you can see, both the 302 Grand and the 50 Clifton sites are currently vacant lots. On the south side of the block, there is a large four-story building with a sloping roof and a one-story shed attached adjacent to 302 Grand. The opposite side of the street features three larger brick buildings, each separated by courtyards. The building opposite 302 Grand, 293 Grand Avenue, was built in 1910 and has an entrance directly onto the street. The simplified brownstone construction of 50 Clifton Place finishes the block and has a front garden, metal railings and fence, brownstone stoop, large wood door, and a metal parapet with no dentils. The facade of 50 Clifton Place becomes brick when it turns a corner to Grand Avenue and has a bay window. These are some of the building elements in the area. You can see the corbelling on St. James Place and Green Avenue when it turns a corner on the lower left. There are bay windows as well on several corner buildings. 302 Grand Avenue is a more commercial street. The building to the left is a side elevation of 230. Oh, I'm sorry. Number. Well, 302 Grand is a more commercial street. The building to the left is a side elevation of 231 Green Avenue. It is a four-story building with a sloping roof and attached shed. We have the same configuration as the opposite side of Grand Avenue. Three facades separated by an open space. 302 Grand is a glass guardrail to make its facade appear shorter than the 50 Clifton Place, which has a brick parapet. This allows the buildings to have different visual heights while still keeping the maximum height allowed for both buildings. 302 Grand Avenue has a simple design with traditional proportions and modern detailing. We have single pane windows, long thin brick, stepped window surrounds, and a minimal bluestone cornice. These are some of the inspiration photos for 302 Grand. 476 Washington Avenue on the upper left is the only modern building we are able to identify in the Clinton Hill Historic District. This building also keeps the townhouse proportions and has modern windows and a modern parapet. 41 Bond Street in Manhattan on the lower left is made of long slabs of bluestone and the window rounds project. 100 Franklin to the right is a mixture of long brick and standard brick. And 259-261 Berry on the upper right is a brick facade with a minimal cornice. The materials for the brownstone are brownstone on Clifton Place with red brick on the Grand Avenue facade, long brick with bluestone sills and cornice on 302 Grand. Here are the elevations of Clifton and Grand. The rear facade of 50 Clifton is brick, and there's a narrow courtyard in the back at the basement level. These are some details of the 50 Clifton stoop and entry to the basement level, as well as the bay window, which uses some ironwork for the yard and for the door that goes into the basement. These are some sections through the showing the stoop and the rear courtyard and through the bay window. This is the detail of the transition from brownstone to brick as we turn the corner of Clifton Place to Grand Avenue. The cornice and parapet of 50 Clifton, it's a simplified cornice with no dentils. And overall, the design is, simplified to make it a little bit more modern. These are some, this is an elevation of the Grand Avenue block below. And above the other three sides of 302, facades of 302 Clinton. There's a terrace in the courtyard of 302 Grand on the north facade. This is some of the brick detailing around the windows. For the front of the 302 Grand facade, long brick with protruding brick around the windows and door. This is the cornice of 302 Grand Avenue. It's a minimal cornice in bluestone instead of a tall parapet as we have on. And there's a glass railing. These are the floor plans for Grand and Clifton. You can see the small courtyard for 50 Clifton and the terrace with the carport for 302 Grand. Condensers are in the basement area, courtyard for Clifton Place, and on the roof behind the bulkhead for 302 Grand, so they're not visible. And these are some corner conditions in the area. There's often a space, an open area, a courtyard, or a low building when we turn the corner in the area. That's the presentation.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions? Yes, Vice Chair Bland.
Is it for market reasons or code or zoning reasons that you have two buildings rather than one longer?
Well, the issue is that 48 Clifton has windows. It's a single zoning law. So 48 Clifton has windows facing east. So we had to keep that open. And then two buildings on the same zoning law need to be a certain distance apart based on the height of the building. So that's why we ended up with two buildings. Otherwise, we could have built out the whole corner.
That's what I was sort of wondering about. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
How are you heating and cooling the buildings?
It's electric, all electric.
Thank you. And are you doing more than energy code requirement for insulation?
We're meeting an energy code.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Following up on Fred's question, have you encountered other examples of multi-story buildings in this kind of mid-block position at the end of a courtyard of a typical brownstone row? I'm familiar with like garages and maybe a garage with a one-story addition on top, or converted garages, But maybe it's my lack of knowledge of the neighborhood, but I don't recall ever seeing a building of this scale mid-block.
The building across Grant is actually,
It's in the middle of the block?
yeah, I can go back to those images. We actually have the same configuration as the opposite side of the street.
Right, and I would just note across the street is outside of the historic district, but the example that is being shown is a historic building.
So that's the 293 Grand. Which one is that?
So 233 Green is in the historic district. 293 Grand is not.
So you're modeling your project on 293 Grand as a middle of the block kind of multi-story residential building.
Right.
It's a single family townhouse.
Multi-stories.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sort of.
And would you characterize your two buildings as the one on the corner is kind of historically inspired and the one in the middle is supposed to be more contemporary in style?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
So conceptually, it's interesting party. The two buildings are different.
Yes.
One is traditional, one is modern.
Yes.
In configuration. Why the shift?
Well, the 50 Clifton Place is the end of a typical townhouse block. So we wanted to keep that more traditional when we turn the corner. And then 302 Grand, it's open on both sides. It has a shed, on one side. And it just seemed like there wasn't, a historical precedent for that sort of thing. That it would be more interesting to do something modern at that point.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. I don't see any questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. And I just will first ask if there's anyone in the room who would like to testify on this item. All right. So seeing that there's no one in the room, I will turn it over to Gregory College to walk us through our remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received one sign up in advance for this item, and that person being John Graham from the Victorian Society of New York. So John Graham, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society of New York. The Victorian Society is pleased to support this proposal to build adjacent single-family houses, finding it to be compatible for both this historic district and adjacent buildings. We commend the applicant for their decision to reinforce the street walls on Grand Avenue and Clifton Place with elevations which are similar in height and scale to adjacent buildings, and with a material mix which will add variety to the streetscape while maintaining a common vocabulary. We especially like the use of the oriel window at 50 Clifton and the long bricks at 302. However, we feel that the proposal as presented misses many small opportunities. First, each house would be immediately improved by more obviously varying the height of the windows in a 3 bears pattern, with the tallest windows at the parlor floor, an intermediate size at the second, and the smallest at the top floor. The architect has already done this, but the effect should be strengthened. It would be useful to differentiate the areaway railings at the two houses, with each style to reflect the character of its house. 50 Clifton is a wider house than its neighbors and would benefit from more developed and robust detailing. The addition of window lintels, a masonry door and framement, a pair of wood and glass doors, and larger lanterns would all add character to this facade. Board 14 shows the way the historic paired doors at the two adjacent houses on Clifton enhance these buildings. At 302, we respect the applicant's decision to create a modern version of a row house, but we'd suggest modern doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as plain. Here we also urge the use of a wider door enframement and larger lanterns. Finally, we've seen how quickly glass handrails get dirty and how few people are dedicated to keeping them spotless. We recommend the use of a modern handrail with dark posts and rails and wire, cable, or mesh infill. They're unobtrusive and no frequent cleaning required. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. We are generally supportive of plans for new buildings on open lots, and we find the proposed height, scale, and materials to be appropriate, but we feel the detailing of these two buildings to be lacking in convincing resolution. The applicant has proposed one fairly modern building and one more traditional one, but neither is fully realized. We would like to see the architect commit stylistically to each approach such that one of the buildings is more clearly modern and the other more appropriately traditional. We feel that the 50 Clifton building requires the most further study and refinement. To be specific, the main parlor floor entry needs an enframement. The window sills are too high on the parlor floor. The lintels above the windows need further articulation. The plinth level precast brownstone is awkwardly detailed both where it transitions to brick on the east elevation and where it transitions to brownstone on the Clifton Place facade. Further, the two-story oriel on the east-facing Grand Avenue facade is oddly placed and not thoroughly detailed. Perhaps centering it on the facade or dropping the base of the oriel down to engage the plinth-level brownstone would help. Here again, the lack of brownstone lintels above the punched window openings is awkward and makes the facade look unresolved. The 302 Grand building could also use further study and refinement. In particular, the rooftop glass rail is inappropriate, and the front door and its enframement seem unresolved. We ask that the Commission require this applicant to continue to work on developing and refining the details for this promising project. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Claudette Brady. So Claudette Brady, I am promoting you to panelist right now. So if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you. Hello, Claudette Brady, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Sorry, my unmute wasn't working. All right, thank you. My name is Claudette Brady from Bedford-Stuyvesant. The applicant has presented two buildings, each still seeking identity. The 50 Clifton Place is a traditional building, but lacks the robust application of ornamentation such as more articulated lintels, proper door framing. The cornice and bay appear to be anemic based on the size of the building. For the modern building, the building needs to be unabashedly modern. At this point, it's just a plain brown box. I would suggest that the architect go back and really commit to each design as presented, modern and traditional. Thank you for hearing me today.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking through the attendees list now. I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that we received a recommendation of approval from Brooklyn Community Board 2. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Well, we simplified the traditional corner townhouse details. Because it seemed that it would be better to have minimal detailing around the proportions and all the elements of a townhouse. The 302 Grand building looks simple, but the surrounds of the windows project 4 inches. They step down at the top, and it's long brick, so it's not a flamboyantly modern building. It has townhouse proportions. It has a taller parlor floor, and it will be a simple but bold around in terms of the detailing around the windows. And the glass, I'm not sure it needs to be cleaned very often, but I think it's a nice modern detail, and it would be more attractive than painted black metal railing. Also, there are interlayers in the glass that could be opaque or semi-opaque, so it would be a nice modern detail. We looked at having rentals above the window on 50 grand, and thought it looked better without having a rental. And that sort of relates a little bit to the 302 Grand facade also.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, let's move to our discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
I'm sorry.
Would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Sorry.
All right.
I make a motion to close the hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So this is an interesting site. It's a corner site with 2 different conditions on Clifton Place and Grand Avenue. And so I think the first question in our discussion should be whether doing 2 buildings on this lot is appropriate. I think as some questions have shown that typically we see deeper buildings or buildings with a carriage house at the back. And so, but the applicant has responded talking about the 2 characters of Clifton and Grand Avenue, and then also showing the historic building right across Grand Avenue, which is also a front-facing multi-story building within 100 feet of the corner. As a precedent. And so that's the first question, is sort of these 2 multi-story buildings on one lot. And the second is the approach to have them being 2 different styles, and one being more sort of traditional, closer to the traditional buildings on Clifton Place, and the other being more contemporary, again, to address the 2 different contexts. And then the third is the usual level of the materiality, level of detail, and composition of the building. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
This is an incredible composition of 2 building blocks and a connecting element. And it's conceptually quite interesting, almost very, very interesting. And the existing corner one is almost traditional, but not completely. Could be more, a matter of degree, how far you want to go with the traditional elements or not. The modern one, the same thing. How far do you want to go? And that's the architect's preview to decide how far he wants to go. The element that's a little bit weak in the whole thing is the connecting element, the garage and the lower level. And that's an important element, and I don't know if it should be subordinate or tertiary to the 2 volumes, or it should be how connected it should be in the kind of classical sense of connective sense. But I think that could be restudied. And I think the degree of detail on A and B it's up to the architect, and I have a preference, but I would say now, but it's up to them to decide which way you want to go. But I think the concept and the idea of it is quite elegant.
Commissioner Master?
I think that it's appropriate to have these two buildings in terms of the mass and the scale where they are on this lot. The question is kind of, as Commissioner Jefferson said, the details in terms of, how modern you want to go or how classic you want to go. And I'm just going to leave that up to more the architects. I'd like to hear what they have to say.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
I think that the massing is fine and positioning. I think that the corner building, because it's a corner building, could use a little bit more refinement, such as there's no ripples above the windows, which there are on most of the rest of the block. It's a minor thing, but maybe a little bit of kind of lifting it because it's a corner building. I think that having a more modern building and a more traditional, I think is fine from my perspective. I think that glass railing on the top of the modern building is that we shouldn't see the railing, and ideally or not have a glass. But we usually kind of don't go with the glass railings, even on a more. It's not that modern a building, I think. That the fencing does look very heavy. And I'm wondering if they couldn't have fencing that is more, transparent, and still achieve their purposes, because it's not intended as a, block. It's a visual block, and it just looks kind of heavy for for the surrounding architecture. So I think a different approach to the fencing that's more transparent. So in general, I think it's pretty successful. I think that the way the windows are handled on the modern building makes it pretty interesting, not just a flat composition. There might be something more that could be done with it, but I leave that to the architects to suggest if they think that's true. So I think those are my general comments.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay. I guess I'm not as much of a fan of this project as others. I understand the precedent from across the street, but that precedent itself is rather unusual. And I don't know if it's enough to sway me to believe that a multi-story residential building at this position on this kind of block is necessarily appropriate. It is rather unusual, to say the least. And the funny thing about the building across the street is that it's very kind of neglectful of its neighbors. It's just kind of they took it out of the tenement box and put it down. It doesn't really kind of do the things that we generally look for in historic districts that new buildings do. It doesn't talk to its neighbors. It doesn't seek to make a relationship with what's going on around it too much. So I'm not sure I'm totally swayed by that unusual precedent. That said, if they are going to do a building here, I think that I agree with the testimony, John Graham and the Historic Districts Council both. The fact that they both kind of made the exact same observation is telling to me, and I agree with it 1,000%. I think that when the architect pulls his punches, makes it traditional but not quite, makes it modern but not quite, what winds up with is not quite. It's kind of washed out. And Diana's suggestion about lintels and John's suggestion about the how to deal with the roof on mid-block building, all are good. But I think, you know, the applicant should take advantage of this commission, which has innumerable examples of contemporary and traditional and kind of a little bit of both buildings in this exact configuration, mid-block, end block, infill, that were successful and that were approved. This, I just don't think is there yet. And I think it really needs that level of refinement to contribute to the historic district and not just kind of fit in a kind of cursory way.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
Thank you. So I have three specific comments. I in general think the massing and the more modern and more traditional are fine. And I think there are details that might even be able to be worked out with staff. Some of which have been mentioned. First, on the corner building, a little more detailing on it, I think would be good. Second, that the fence is very heavy and just doesn't seem to work and could be used as an element to somewhat tie the two buildings together, which it doesn't do now. Third, the glass railing on the mid-block building should be metal and pulled back a bit so it's less visible. And I look at also with that mid-block building, the upper set of windows seem too tall. We go from big to middle instead of big to middle to smaller. And I think that could help that building. So I'd look at that too.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Chen.
I think I'm totally on the Commissioner Ginsburg comment. I also with the rest of the comment, I think I'm also than Michael Goldwyn for the two buildings here. And I think the articulation on the corner building, I agree with Diana and the comment about the glass railing on the top. And I think Commissioner Ginsburg's suggestion on the working on the fencing to make it tight into the two buildings together, maybe they should work with staff on that.
Great, thank you very much, Vice Chair Glenn.
This is an architectural conundrum, I think. I think it's a really interesting idea, actually, to put these two buildings on the lot. Even though it's an unusual and not perhaps a precedent to put this the mid-block building. The fact that it's not a precedent, to me, is kind of exciting, actually. It kind of jazzes up the historic district, it gives it a syncopation. However, frankly, it looks better in the rendered view than the elevation, but keep the elevation up here because that's what I'm staring at. And what I'm looking at is basically two buildings that are the same. One tarted up a little bit to be historic, one tarted up a little bit to be contemporary, but they're the same building. And that leads me to believe that maybe they should be the same building. One or the other. I would prefer two contemporary buildings. I think this is an oddball position. I don't expect other commissioners to agree with me on this, but I just think that right now, and it's been said in testimony and around the table already, that neither one pushes the envelope enough. It's not historic enough or it's not contemporary enough. But I'm just questioning whether they should even do that, whether they should just choose one or the other. But I much prefer the contemporary approach because it's a new building in the historic district. And we know, goodness knows, we know lots of great new buildings have been built in historic districts over years and years and years. So I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to comment on details because I think it's inappropriate having said what I've said. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Lutfi.
What a great assignment. How fortunate to be able to get a parcel like this, a corner building with open space and then another building. They don't come around too often, and they're an incredible opportunity in a neighborhood like this, on a block like this, which is, pretty, I can only see part of it, but what I'm looking at looks like it's relatively intact, in good condition, and with some interesting variation between the buildings. I really love conceptually what you're trying to do here. I think it's a great idea to be working with more traditional approach and then to pivot. And you literally have that opportunity because of the way the site is laid out. And I think, I don't want to say this in a pejorative way. I think this is a very good beginning. And the reason why I'm saying beginning is I do think you need to do a few things here. First of all, you have a corner building. Corner buildings in brownstone neighborhoods are so visually important. They can be memorable buildings. And so without telling you that you have to, do a traditional building, I think you want to do something to this building to make it a little more memorable. This is just a little bit too understated. And I think what some of the other commissioners started saying is it's a little undercooked. So I would go back to this building and look at it because I think you have more opportunity. And some of the recommendations actually were not bad, whether it's the lintels or maybe it's something with the lower windows, but just something so that when people walk by this building, they think like that's really interesting. And then it's actually yet another introduction to what goes behind it, which, I think you've been very smart to do something that's modern. And if you just separate them a little more without going crazy, and pay attention. Some of the comments I think have been good. I don't want to, I actually think that the Mark's comment about the windows was an interesting comment on the top of the modern building, but you definitely need to think about this fence and anything else as part of the connection that in a way sort of separates them, but makes it clear that they are of a piece. And I also think that that glass railing on the top has to go, and whatever you put there should set back, because I think you want that building, whatever refinements you do to the modern building, I think you want it to be a little bit of a gem because it's a surprise. So after you go around the corner from this like special building that gets tweaked a little, then all of a sudden it's like an aha moment. And so that would be my recommendation to what happens here.
Great. All right. Thank you, commissioners, for all of your really thoughtful comments. And so I think we saw, as Commissioner Lutfi said, a good beginning today, but I think that it needs some work. We're not going to take an action. I think that most commissioners are supportive of these two buildings on this lot configured in this way. And most commissioners are comfortable with two different stylistic approaches, a more contextual or traditional building and a more contemporary building. But we've heard a lot of suggestions about how you could enhance either of those, how you can connect them with the fence in between and have there be a dialogue between the two of them, but have them each really express their own stylistic approach through the details. And I think Vice Chair Bland, I was sort of with you. I also sort of wondered if they should be the same, and that maybe as you develop these details, you may come to that conclusion. But I think there is support here for the two different approaches, and as you develop those details, I think you'll find.
I could just point out, if you're I don't know if this helped or not, but scores of brownstone rows, both in Brooklyn and in Manhattan, were developed at one time, same house, as we know. So there's nothing wrong necessarily with having a same house.
Right.
I mean, you may not want it.
Agree. So I think, continue to work with the staff as you develop and really refine all of the details, looking at the examples in the district, particularly for the corner building. And then that I think will inform you as you think about what your approach is on the other building. So we'll have you back when you're ready. Okay. Thank you.
All right, we'll now move to the next two items, which are being presented together. It's items 6 and 7. Both are applications for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 450. We have lots 38 and 39, 304 and 306 Carroll Street in the Carroll Gardens Historic District. Both are row houses designed by Edward P. Crane and built in 1872-73. So for item 6, LPC 23-10618, this is an application to legalize the installation of stucco at the rear facade and alteration of the areaway fence and curb without LPC permits and to replace windows. And for item 7, LPC 23-09006, this is an application to alter facades and modify openings, replace windows, raise the height of the roof, install ironwork, enlarge the rear yard addition, and reconstruct the garage, including a roof deck.
Wow, we're in today.
Hello, commissioners. I'm Naomi Tauger. I am a senior project designer for Ben Herzog Architect in Brooklyn. And again, I'm presenting our proposed work at 304 and 306 Carroll in the Carroll Gardens Historic District of Brooklyn. Looking at the plot plan here, you see the two subject properties. 304 is the property adjacent to the corner. It has a large front garden and rear yard, and 306 is the corner property. It was a one-story existing extension, about 100 square feet, and about a 70 square foot outer court adjacent to that, and then an existing 3-car garage along Hoyt Street, the Hoyt Street face. They're both 2-story Italian 8-row houses with basements. You will see by looking at the plot plan, existing and proposed, that except for the infill, the addition at the existing outer court at 306 Carroll, there is no proposed change to the existing footprints of these buildings. The bulk of the work that we're proposing today is largely restorative work to the exterior of the two buildings. I will be presenting today just the work that requires commission level approval. You'll see that there's a lot of work being proposed here today. So thank you for minding just those items. Looking at the existing and historic photos of the two properties, you see 304 here in its existing state and 306 here in its existing state, which wraps the corner with the extension and the garage. You see that it's sort of a tale of two row houses, in that 304 was purchased in the 90s, is inhabited by that same owner. They've done a number of restorative and work to the property, and today it looks very much like a 1940s tax photo, whereas 306 Carroll has been subject to a number of modernizations. Looking at the front facade, prior to the designation, the cornice was removed running along Carroll and along Hoyt Street, but since the designation, a number of modernizations were undertaken by the previous owners, many of which are the subject of LPC violations. Our proposed work will remedy those violations and also restore much of the historic detail to this property. You can see on the existing facade of 306 Carroll that the first floor, the parlor windows have been blocked up at the upper portion. They've been reduced in height. Many of the windows on the side facade, including the original Oriole Bay, have been blocked up or removed. And you see these beautiful roll-down security gates at the garage. So moving to the primary facades, you'll see that at 304 Carroll, which again is the inside building. The main work we're proposing is just replacing the existing windows with 2/2 clad windows. Again, in the historic photo, it was a 1/1 window, but given the prevalence of the 2/2 configuration throughout the district, including this block at the other end of Carroll Street, we hope that the 2/2 will be deemed appropriate. At the 306 facade, we will be restoring the cornice, and then again, the 2/2 window configuration. You see the restoration of the brownstone details at the windows, the crown, the full enfrayment, the deep sill, and the corbels. And then looking at the window details, again, you see those the built up elements would be clad in a brownstone finish. You see the crown and the enfrayment and the bracketed sill at these windows. Going back to the main elevation for a moment, you see one of the original details of these lots and throughout the district is the broad garden, the low curb, giving a very garden feel to the Carroll Gardens Historic District. So while we will be restoring the historic ironwork fence at 306 Carroll, we are proposing legalizing remediation work that was done at the early 90s to the 304 Carroll Street facade. If you look at moving ahead. The existing condition here, you can see the historic photo on the left and the existing condition on the right. There was a lot of deterioration to the lower ironwork fence, so the homeowners matched their neighbor on the right with the higher brownstone curb and the brownstone piers for the gate, which is in very good condition, except for some missing finials and some deteriorated pickets. So while we will be restoring the ironwork fence at 306 Carroll, to its historic condition, we would like to legalize the existing condition at 304 Carroll and then repair and restore the ironwork that is remaining. Moving to the Hoyt Street facade, looking at the historic and existing condition, you see that again, a lot of the historic character of this facade has been removed over time. Windows have been blocked up at the basement level. The Oriole Bay has been removed, an additional window added at this little powder room. But you can see the facade also has these blind recesses with existing lintels and sills. So we will be, we're proposing 6 new window openings on this Hoyt Street facade. The 5 at the first and second floor will be taking those existing blind recesses, preserving the lintels and sills, and then installing 2/2 clad windows. And then the additional opening is symmetrically placed underneath the reproduced oriel bay. And that's to provide enough light and air for that as a habitable bedroom there along the facade. If we take a walk through, these are just some details of those window openings. You see the blind window openings. Just retain their original size and detail, and then will be opened for the 2/2 windows. Walking through the district, you see this Hoyt Street facade has an interesting position where it is in a way a primary facade along First Street. It faces the other side of Hoyt Street where there are obviously many window openings along those primary facades. But even in this corner spot where we're looking northwest from the corner of Hoyt and First, we see the property across the way has openings at all 3 floors. So we feel that it will be contextual to reopen those window openings. Moving further down that Hoyt Street facade, we see an extension and garage in very poor condition. The photo here shows the existing roof. You can see the photos inside the garage and in that extension with significant water damage. So we are proposing reconstructing the existing extension and garage, and again, infilling that outer court that you saw earlier to fill the entire 100% of the corner lot. So looking at this, it just shows the existing plans across the bottom with that outer court below. And then we are doing some reconfiguring on the interior so that less of that garage will be garage space and more occupiable space. And you'll see that how that plays out and our proposed garage door configuration. But other than that, there is no discernible difference to the mass or punctuation of that Hoyt Street extension and garage facade. Here you do see the existing and proposed elevations. You can see that the roof line is maintained. The current garage extension is a brick patterned veneer material, and we're proposing reconstructing it with a true brick veneer and installing rollick and soldier courses to mimic more of the original decorative features shown in the historic photo. You do see that there is a visible guardrail at the proposed roof deck, which spans across the extension and the garage. Working with the client, it's their preference to have a slightly more ornate railing at this location rather than a typical basic picket. So we wanted to introduce this Gothic triangle, which picks up from the detail of the railing and the gates and the celebration of decorative ironwork that you do see throughout the Carroll Gardens Historic District. We also took inspiration from, this is another one of our projects, rear facade at 468 Henry, which actually has very decorative ironwork at its rear facade. This is a multi-story sort of portico on that property. So unusual, but we hope that this small bit of detail will be found appropriate. And again, looking at this elevation, you see that we are preserving the outline of the garage, and then the masonry opening itself from the 3-car garage will be maintained with the new, you see 2 pedestrian doors and 1 garage door. So this actually accesses that occupiable space inside. Moving to the details of the specifications for that garage door, we wanted to have it feel like a mahogany finish to match the front doors that will be restored at 304 and 306 Carroll. But looking at historic garage doors, the thermal properties and the UV durability of this face, we found that the 5-layer composite is a much better match for the sustainability and durability goals of the client. So we brought a sample with us that's there on the table that you can look at. We find that, and then the casing for this will be flat cedar stained mahogany to match the doors. The mullions here will be clad in wood stained to match the mahogany doors. And the goal here is to have the overall pacing feel like the 6-leaf door of the original garage, but again, with 1 garage door and 2 pedestrian doors. The pedestrian doors will receive proposed security gates, and the ironwork in those will match the ironwork that is on the existing gate at 304 Carroll. Moving around to the rear facade, at the bulk of the work at the rear facade will be at 306 Carroll. At 304 Carroll, we are proposing or asking to legalize the scored stucco that has been applied to the rear facade. This was done in the early 90s and is in very good condition. And since we're making limited modifications to this facade, we would like to legalize it. This photo here shows that the properties adjacent to the west of 304 Carroll, and they are a mix of painted brick and stucco in a range of colors from light to dark. And we feel that the existing scored stucco it doesn't stand out. So we'd like to concentrate the work at the rear facade to 306 Carroll, again, filling in that outer court, which is in bad repair. And again, so then you're looking at the rear facade of 306 Carroll. You see that here again, the windows have been infilled. There's a significant crack running along the joint of those 2 properties. So a lot of the work will be restoring and rebuilding that facade with a brick veneer face, but there are some other modifications that we would like to make. In addition to an enlarged opening at the first floor, which would be thermally broken steel windows and doors with transoms above and a cast stone lintel. We would like to extend the parapet of 306 Carroll up to match the parapet of 304 Carroll and shift the second floor windows up to be in alignment with the second floor windows of 304 Carroll. Here we would reproduce the dogtooth detail below the gutter. We would have the arched masonry openings. Here we would have 2/2 windows. You see some of the details of that new enlarged, the thermally broken steel and glass assembly within the enlarged opening. You see that the windows will be aligning with the edges of the windows above, and that the lintel will align with the window headers at 304 Carroll. The cast stone above and the sills and saddles below will match the stone that is existing at the Hoyt Street facade of 306 Carroll. Our property, the Carroll Gardens Historic District is very small. It's just a little bit over 2 blocks, but there are a number of precedents at the corners where you see over an extension of a fence and you see this rear facade condition. And a number of them do step up and down, like our existing condition at 306 and 304 Carroll with the topography, or with additions, as you see over here at 307 and 309 Carroll. But there are also a number where they align all the way across, as they do here at 321 and 327 Hoyt, which is just within a block away. So we have this photo here where we have mocked up that parapet extension, and you can see that with the modifications we're proposing, it will be very much akin to this precedent in the district. Lastly, I wanted to present our proposed mechanical equipment. You can see. Okay, so I don't need to talk. I have been informed. Well, that brings me to the end of my presentation. There's some zoning and additional historic photos at the end if needed, but I'm happy to hear your comments and questions.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
I got confused. Which 304 or 306, which one you legalizing the back facade? 304 or 306, right? Which facade are you legalizing in the rear?
Which facade?
It's 304, so it's not the corner building. It's one in from the corner with the brown colored stucco. And evidently the stucco was applied in the 1990s, so they're seeking to legalize.
Yeah, so you see that. in the
Yes,
front.
Commissioner Chapin.
The fence in the front, it looks like that the adjacent building to your two buildings has the same gate. Did that fence, that ornate fence continue down the block at all, or beyond your two buildings?
A number of the properties on Carroll Street have that same ornate fencing.
So it probably was installed when they were built, in effect.
Oh, yes, it was.
Yeah. I just wondered because I could see it seemed to continue. Okay, and do other buildings have footings in some cases, or are they
Yes, throughout the block, there are a number that have been modified over
at
time.
different levels?
At different levels, yes.
Thank you.
It's not the same consistency that
uniform.
it once was.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other questions? All right, let's see. We haven't had anyone sign up to speak, but I just want to check in the room to make sure there's nobody here that wants to speak on this item. Okay. All right, so then I'll turn it over to Gregory to take us through any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received one sign up in advance, that being Leanne Funk from the Victorian Society. So I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, this is Lynn Funk.
Hello, Lynn.
Hello. The Victorian Society is always glad to see a proposal which is responsive to its neighbors, its street and historic district. We're also delighted to see an application which corrects unfortunate work done prior to designation. This work will greatly enhance the house's garage and the district. And it shows, not incidentally, what can be done when a stripped brownstone house stripped brownstone house besides demolition. The application of stucco to the rear facade is a typical alteration, and if it's traditional breathable stucco, should cause no long-term damage. In that case, we have no objection to its legalization. Opening the blind windows facing Hoyt Street is an appropriate type of change found on many historic buildings of all types and ages. We find it odd to open the parlor front window into the entrance vestibule. We don't know what the interior plan is, but from the exterior, a window here, it should not logically exist. Perhaps this window and the one above it should remain blind. There are two other small changes which could make the project even better. First, for small buildings of this type and this close to the sidewalk, wood windows with a painted finish would be a significant improvement over the metal clad windows proposed. Second, the base of the fence, which enclosed the garden at 304, is now encased in stucco clad masonry. This would be an excellent opportunity to remove the modern base and restore the original garden fence at 304 to the design shown in the tax photos. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking through our attendee list now, and I do not see any other hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 6 recommends conditional approval so long as the applicant removes brownstone on the east elevation, so the design is consistent with other buildings in the district and surrounding area. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to turn back to you and ask if you'd like to address any of the comments. I think the Victorian Society was largely supportive, but had some detailed comments, and there's the community board as well.
So to address the Victorian Society's comments, the configuration on the inside of 306 Carroll is such that those windows can be opened. There will be a dining room and kitchen space beyond. And we feel that opening all of the windows equally will give a better composition than opening some of them and leaving some of them closed, especially given that corner condition that we showed where the windows relate to each other right across Hoyt Street. I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to find that. And then in response to community board 6's comments regarding the brownstone at the garden level, we have removed that from our proposal.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any final questions? Oops. All right, let's move to our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing? So moved. Thank you, Commissioner Master. Would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And just, I know there are a lot of components to it. So just to break it down quickly, at 304 Carroll, which is the building one in from the corner, there are two components of work. Their applicant is seeking to legalize modifications to the front areaway fence, which involved creating a sort of a low wall with a fence on top of it, and also seeking to legalize the brownstone colored stucco on the rear facade, which was applied in the 1990s. And then at 306 Carroll Street, which is the corner building, there are four components basically. The first is opening up the blind window openings on the side facade. And that also includes a second window opening at the basement level below the oriel window. So the pair will sort of align with the oriel window above. It also includes at the rear facade, raising the height of the rear facade to align with 304. It is a slight adjustment, but that would involve lifting the heads of the windows and then combining the parlor floor window openings. And the third component is also to legalize the coating at the rear facade. And the fourth component is the reconstruction of the garage. So we can organize our comments around those basic components. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sure. This is a lovely presentation, I think. I think it's an interesting one because there's so many little pieces and parts that seek to look at the buildings holistically, and from a historic preservation perspective. And I think generally, I don't disagree with any of the decisions made. I think that under normal circumstances, the raising of the windows on the corner building on the rear facade would be questionable because it would be like kind of fixing a historical situation for aesthetic reasons. But I think in this case, since that building has been already significantly modified over the years, doing such a thing would be more than acceptable to me. I think that the legalization of the rear facade on the mid-block building is again totally appropriate and contextually supported. I think that the only thing I would comment on, I think the railing having that slight elaboration over the garage is a big deal. Lovely, why not? I've used that garage material, that kind of fake wood, and I thought it'd be great, but it really looked like plastic. So I would urge them to be careful with that. And I would suggest that unless they're totally in love with that idea and think that plastic looking wood is okay, I think that a painted finish would be more historically supported.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
Sarah, just one sec. Just when we're getting the commentary on the windows at the front, it's the configuration going from 1/1 to 2.
Thank you for reminding me of
material being metal clad wood rather than wood.
So
no problem with either.
Okay. Commissioner Ginsburg.
I will agree with Commissioner Goldblum's comments. The one thing, and are we just talking about 304 now? So we shouldn't mention.
We can talk about both if you want to break it up by building. That's fine.
The one comment I have is I think it's 306 with the low masonry wall and fence. Get rid of the masonry wall, put a curb in, and put a fence to match the other buildings. But that relatively minor comment, if others agree.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Bland.
I think I'm in agreement. In agreement as well. I'll just point out it's kind of the reverse of what we often do, but the historic photos go way back. I don't know when that is, probably 1940s something or earlier. The windows have been blocked up a long time, so we're unblocking up a historic layer, which I think is a great idea. But I mean, I'm just saying we often look to the layering of buildings to tell us the story of the history. But notwithstanding that, I think it's a good thing to unblock those windows. In fact, I think it's a great thing. I don't think I have anything to add to what's been said already.
And do you have thoughts about the areaway fence? It was a fence on a curb and now it's on a low wall.
I think it should be a fence on the curb.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi?
I think I'm in agreement with all the comments, including the comments about the fence and the low wall.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I'm pretty much in agreement, but just one clarification, 304, we're not legalizing, we're removing the stucco and going back to.
Right, so they're asking to just keep the stucco on the rear. And so far, we've heard comments that fits in with the context and is okay. They're also at 304 seeking to legalize the change to the fence. And we've heard some comments that they should return it to a low curb with a fence.
I agree with that.
Okay.
And in terms of 306, the facade modification of the windows, of course. Raise the height of the roof. I think that's fine. I think some question about the ironworks, enlarged rear yard addition, and that's fine. I agree with.
Okay. Great, thanks. Commissioner Master?
Yes, I agree with all the comments, including 304, the low wall be removed, historic iron fence be restored. 306, I agree with everything, and look at the garage material to make sure that it looks like real painted wood. Thanks.
Painted finish. Great, thanks. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I basically agree with everything. However, with regard to the fence, I would have been okay to just leave it on top of the, because it's the existing fence as far as I could tell. And that's why I asked the question about what's going on in the whole block. It's down the whole block, but it's at varying levels. So I don't think this stands out that much. If everyone wants them to return it, I can go with the majority. That would be nice, but.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, I don't know if you actually mentioned the fence.
I'm with Diana. I'm okay with it as is. If you want to take it down, that's fine.
Okay, I think most want to see it go back to a low curb. Would you be comfortable making the motion? So for 304, it would be to legalize the stucco, but to modify the fencing onto a low curb. And then for 306, it would be approval with the painted finish on the doors.
Okay, regarding 304 Carroll Street in the Carroll Gardens Historic District, the application is to legalize the installation of stucco at the rear facade, an alteration of areaway fence and curb without LPC permits, and replace windows. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Carroll Gardens Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed windows of the Carroll Street facade will match historic windows in terms of operation, finish, and details. The proposed 2/2 windows will be consistent with historic configurations, sometimes found in buildings of this scale, style, type, and age. That the change in material from wood to metal clad wood will not be perceptible from the sidewalk and will not call into attention to itself. That the rear facade is only visible from a public thoroughfare at an angle from the north on Hoyt Street, and that the alterations to the rear facades over time, including the applications of stucco paint and other coatings, are commonly found at buildings of this type and age and have occurred within this row. Therefore, the coating of the rear facade, which was completed without an LPC permit, does not draw undue attention to itself or detract from the unity of the row. However, I recommend that the applicant work with staff to lower the front wall at the garden and restore and reinstall the historic iron fence.
Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
Sorry, Mark, would you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland. Aye. Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Master.
Aye.
9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Regarding 306 Carroll Street in the Carroll Gardens Historic District, the application is to alter facades and modify openings, replace windows, raise the height of the roof, install ironwork, enlarge rear addition, reconstruct the garage, including the roof deck. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Carroll Gardens Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant historic features, that the installation of 2/2 double hung windows at 5 historically blind openings at the east facade with simple cast stone lintels will be in keeping with windows commonly found at the side and rear facades at buildings of this type, style, and age, that the proposed enlarged opening at the basement level of the east facade will align with the oriel window to be restored above and will harmonize with the pattern of masonry openings of this facade, that the proposed windows at the north and east facades will match historic windows in terms of operation, finish, and details, that the proposed 2/2 windows will be consistent with historic configurations sometimes found at buildings in this style, type, and age, that the change in material from wood to metal clad will not be perceptible from the sidewalk and will not call undue attention to itself, that the historic areaway gate that was removed and was simply designed, and the proposed areaway gate will be harmonious with the historic ironwork to be recreated, that the raising of the roof and the rear parapet by approximately 14 inches to align with the parapet of 304 Carroll Street will match the existing details of the facade and will not disrupt a continuous pattern in the row, that modification of the window openings to the rear facade to align with 304 Carroll Street will be consistent with the conditions at other buildings in this row, that the enlarged masonry opening at the rear facade will feature divided light windows with mullions break down the scale of the opening will not substantially alter the character or solid to void ratio of the secondary facade, that the rear yard has already been significantly reduced by the construction of the garage and existing addition, which are common features of corner row houses. Therefore, the expansion of the addition and elimination of the rear yard will not overwhelm the row house or further impact the central green space, that the enlargement of the rear yard addition will not be visible from public thoroughfares and will align in height with the existing addition and garage. The reconstruction of the garage, which is a utilitarian secondary structure constructed after the main building and later altered, will not result in the loss of significant building of this type and is warranted by its deteriorated condition. That the design of the reconstructed garage featuring garage and service doors, brickwork, and bluestone coping will be in keeping with the general design and materials found at the existing garage and of similar garage buildings found throughout the historic district and will be harmonious with the adjacent building, and that the presence of visible metal railings at the garage will be consistent with the installations that have commonly been added to garage roofs over time. However, the applicant will work with staff on reconsidering the finish of the garage door and surrounding trim.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland. Aye. Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right. So that's approved, and please continue to work with those staff on those final details. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 8, LPC 22-05837, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 291, Lot 12, 120 Pacific Street in the Cobble Hill Historic District. This is a Greek Revival style row house built circa 1842, and the application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of windows.
So you should be able to just click on the screen and then use the arrow keys.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Great. And if you can just introduce yourself by name before you start, that would be great.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. James Coster, architect, presenting 120 Pacific Street in the northwest corner of the Cobble Hill Historic District. 120 Pacific Street is one of 3 triplets, townhouses, brick face townhouses built around 1842, Greek Revival in style. And you can see in this image, our project 120 is the one described on the right or on the left. But all 3 have a similar bearing still. remain a kind of a three-part composition, even though they were all converted to multifamily dwellings at some point in the early 20th century. In particular, our building and the one immediately adjacent, 118, probably weren't of the same ownership at that time. They have matching Renaissance Revival metal cornices that replaced the original. The metal fire escapes were surely added at that time as well, and it's not a stretch to imagine that the current 1/1 windows were installed at that time. We are proposing a master plan for window replacement for this house that would include all 10 street-facing wood 1/1 windows. And our proposal would be to replace them with an aluminum clad 1/1 window of identical configuration and silhouette. As noted previously, these 1/1 windows have probably been in place for at least 100 years. And certainly since the 1940 tax photo there on the right that shows they were already in place at that time. This is just a close-up of the cellar and first floor windows to give a little bit more context. At the rear of the house, also to incorporate in this master plan, we see a mix of 2/2 and 1/1 windows. We are proposing to replace all of these as well with a matching 1/1 aluminum clad window, as well as the terrace door in the middle with a similar aluminum clad terrace door. It's understood that in 1842, Greek Revival townhouses of this kind and in this era would have had 6/6 windows. It is our argument that because of their conversion to multifamily at the turn of the last century, and their sort of inexorable changes to the underlying typology, that these buildings have been sort of transformed in a way because of the metal cornices, because of the 1/1 windows, because of the fire escapes, and the poor soldier on the right lost its stoop as well. So we are proposing that the 1/1 window replacement is appropriate in that it establishes and reinforces an existing context and existing condition, and is consistent with the current use of these buildings. Our building is a 3-family. The one in the middle, 118, is a 3-family, and 116 is a 5-family. In the broader context, we can see here the entire block. It features a variety of window configurations, with 1/1 windows appearing in 8 out of the 13 houses. The back of the house is slightly visible for about 50 feet along Amity Street, so that's why we are incorporating it. You need good eyes to see it, but it is somewhat visible there. As for the materiality of our proposed replacement, we've gone to great lengths to make sure that the glass line, the profiles, the overall aesthetic appearance of our replacement will exactly match the existing wood silhouettes. Mercifully, Marvin actually makes a aluminum extruded brick mold that is identical to the existing beaded wood brick mold. And it's understood that the existing sill, of course, dating from over 100 years ago, is a thicker wood sill, but also the manufacturer makes a buildup which will ensure that our sill, even though it's built up of aluminum with an extender, will exactly match that silhouette, and the glass line of the bottom rail will also align with the existing. So, in conclusion, we're seeking to replace the existing condition. We are arguing that an aluminum clad window will be aesthetically indistinguishable from the existing wood windows, and that it's appropriate given the overall changes to not just this house, but to all 3 houses over the last century. And I'm eager to receive your questions and comments.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right. I don't see any questions, so we'll see if we have public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? All right. I don't see anyone, so I'll ask Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received one sign up in advance for this item, that being Lynn Funk from BSNY. Lynn Funk, if you're with us, could you please use the raise hand function so I see that you're ready to speak? Okay, so I'm going to wait on Lynn Funk and call on Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please state your name for the record and unmute your line, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. We appreciate that the applicant is proposing a master plan for the future installation of windows at this site. Because this is a Greek Revival building, we believe the windows should be consistent with that style and have 6/6 muntin configuration. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, so I'm going to try to call on Lynn Funk right now. So Lynn Funk, I'm promoting you to panelist. If you're with us, could you please unmute your line and state your name for the record? And you will have 3 minutes to speak. Okay, we seem to be having difficulty getting in touch with Lynn Funk from BSNY. Oh, looks like they just... Yes, so they'll be joining as panelists now.
Hello, it's Lynn Funk for the Victorian Society. Good afternoon. The early 1842 date of this house, along with its conservative design, note the Flemish bond brickwork, brownstone door surround, and beautiful Endymion topped areaway fence leads us to believe that the original windows were 6/6 double hung, as we've discussed, the applicant discussed. A master plan should return the building to that original configuration. We aren't bothered by the possibility that the building will have 2 different window types for a while. Preservation must take the long view. We note that a change in brick pattern shows that the facade above the top floor windows was rebuilt and the cornice replaced, likely in the later 19th century. It's possible that the windows were changed to 1/1 at that time. The case could perhaps be made that this was a significant alteration that should be respected. We are inclined to think otherwise, and that 6/6 windows are correct for this facade, which is predominantly Greek Revival in style. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised, so I will just note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 6 chose not to speak on this item. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to turn back to you and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard. Just make sure you speak into the mic so that the Zoom can pick you up.
So our position is that the building has looked substantially the way that it has for roughly 2/3 of its life. And every time we address a preservation issue, or a restoration issue, it's a question of what do we restore it to? I would argue that this house and its neighbors have looked the way they do now for at least 120, 130, possibly 140 years. And that's certainly 2/3 of its existence. I think it's also the case that the buildings are not in any way used as they were, that they represent a new typology, that they've been stylistically altered already by virtue of the Renaissance Revival features, and of course now clearly a multiple dwelling in character because of the fire escape. So my position is that the typology of these three, and ours in particular, has been inexorably altered, and so that's what makes the 1/1 window configuration appropriate.
Great, thank you very much. Any final questions? All right, not seeing any final questions, we'll move to our discussion. Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed, so we'll begin our discussion. And so this is an application to install aluminum clad wood 1/1 double hung windows. And with the testimony about the original Greek Revival building likely featured 6/6 double hung windows. The applicant has explained that this building was altered in the late 19th century or early 20th century with Renaissance Revival style details, including raising the facade, installing a later style cornice and fire escape. And I think, and all associated with changes to accommodate multiple dwelling inside. And so the 1/1 window configuration, along with these just other stylistic changes, are evident in the tax photo, and they're proposing to maintain that configuration. So we were just talking about layers in our previous discussion and respecting the layers of history. So we'll begin our discussion on this one. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, I think this is a fairly simple one. That this seems reasonable to me, and given that they've been 1/1 for at least 80 years and probably well more than that, I don't feel we need to mandate going back to something that may have existed before that. So I think this is totally appropriate, and I appreciate the applicant submitting a plan for the entire building so we can go through it all together.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
I agree. And in addition to the context that the block majority or the overwhelming majority are already 1/1.
Yes, that's true. Thank you. Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, I agree. But I also want to say it would also be pretty odd, I think, given all the other changes to this building, if all of a sudden we had 6/6. So even though they were once on this building when it was a different building.
That's right. Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I agree. I commend also the applicant for selecting a very high quality window. It's important, and doing a master plan makes sense. It's going to preserve what happens in the future, and it kind of protects the applicant as well going forward.
Great. Commissioner Jefferson?
I'm in agreement.
And Commissioner Master?
I agree. Appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, this is appropriate and very similar to other things that we have approved in other districts and in this district.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum?
Agreed.
All right, great. So I think we have a consensus. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make the motion?
Yes, okay. With regards to LPC 22-05837, 120 Pacific Avenue, Cobble Hill Historic District. A Greek Revival style row house built circa 1842. Application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of windows. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Cobble Hill District. And I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not result in damage or elimination of any significant architectural features, that the building, which may have originally featured white painted 6/6 windows, was altered in the early 20th century to accommodate multifamily occupancy with the raising of the roof line and the installation of new cornice, fire escape, and 1/1 windows. Therefore, the proposed 1/1 windows will maintain the latter historic condition and will be in keeping with the history of change to the building over time. That the row features a variety of window configurations, most with dark finishes. Therefore, the proposed black paint 1/1 windows will be harmonious with the other buildings in the streetscape, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural historic character of the buildings on the Cobble Hill, in the Cobble Hill Historic District.
Thank you. Commissioner Chan, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thanks. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi, Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you. Move to the next and final item. Thank you.
All right, the last item of the day is public hearing item number 9, LPC 23-01174. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1057, lot 34, 147 Sterling Place in the Park Slope Historic District. This is a neo-Greek style flats building built in 1882, and the application is to construct a rear yard addition.
Okay. This is my first presentation under the new format, so give me a second here. I am James Bear, James H. Bear, architect. I'm the designer and the architect of record. So the proposal is for a 2-story full width rear yard addition at 147 Sterling Place, which is in the Park Slope Historic District. There we go. Okay. The center image, can I point? Look at that. Okay, so this image indicates the location within the historic district, which is way up there in that little section there. And then this indicates the house in relationship to the block, which is surrounded by Flatbush Avenue on the top, 7th Avenue on the left, and Sterling Place on the bottom, which is the south. There's 7 residential buildings on that block. They're all within the historic district. The rest of the block consists of 1- and 2-story commercial buildings. They are all outside the historic district. Oh, sorry, wrong direction. This is an aerial view showing the block. Again, the 7 houses in the bottom left-hand corner are the residential. They were all built at circa 1882. The 4 houses that face 7th Avenue were single-family houses, and the 3 buildings that face Sterling Place were built as flats units. They're all a basement and 3 stories. All of the residential buildings, except for the one on the far right, which is 151 Sterling Place, have a rear yard addition of some sort currently. This is a closer view of that, indicating those rear yard additions again. Again, 151, which is the one on the far right, is the only one that does not have an addition of any sort. And I'll show you more of those rear yards in a close-up photo a little bit further on in the presentation. These are existing conditions indicating that you cannot see the rear yard from any of the streets. These are the existing rear yards, with 147 Sterling being over here on the right. Again, 147 Sterling in the middle, and then 149 and 151 Sterling on the left. And again, conditions, other conditions. One is from 147 looking down into the backyards, showing a full width deck at 147 and a partial width addition at 149. This is one of those fancy iPhone panorama pictures. They're so cool. That shows the buildings on the right are the ones that face 7th Avenue. And this is 147, 149, and 151, indicating the existing backyards. The wall that is behind me, that's shown on the right, is the back of the commercial buildings that face Flatbush Avenue. These are those yards that face behind the buildings that face 7th Avenue. The one on the far left has a 1.5-story commercial addition on the back of it. Each of the other ones has a full width 1-story commercial or 1-story rear yard addition. And the one on the far right has a 3-story wood deck addition also. So the far left two drawings show the basement and the first floor, which is the owner's duplex. The existing primary bedroom is in the back of the basement floor. It has an existing master bedroom, primary bedroom, primary bath. Above it is a deck, above to the left is a full width deck. If we start over here on the right, the proposal is to remove the existing primary bathroom extension, move it back a little bit further by about 8 feet, and then put a sitting area and a walk-in closet off of the primary bedroom at the basement level. And then to extend the living room on the first floor level by about 8 feet, has a deck that will access the rear yard and an open porch that will also overlook the rear yard. And then the existing 2-bedroom rental unit on the second floor will have access to a roof deck on the top of the new living room. This is just a larger version of those 3 plans to show them a little more detail. This is the back half of the building showing the existing rear yard extension with the full width deck, and the new 8-foot 2-story addition for the primary bedroom and the living room on the first floor. The primary bathroom is what you see on the right at the basement, and then the open porch is what you see above that. The intention is that will be framed with exposed steel I-beams. So this is the existing elevation is on the left, and the existing isometric is at the top, showing the existing primary bedroom, the primary bathroom, and the deck above it. The proposed isometric is on the bottom, showing the 8-foot extension for both the primary bedroom on the basement level and the living room on the first floor level. The new primary bathroom in the partial width extension and the new open porch above it. And then the proposed elevation is on the far right. See what else we have here. This is the rendering indicating the materials. The intention is that the brick will emulate the existing rear facade as much as possible. So that is a picture of the Glengarry brick and that same panel in front of the existing rear facade. And then all of the windows and all of the metal work will be painted black. This is the mock-up. I did the mock-up twice, and the first one was the one on the right where I just used buckets, and that didn't go over so well with a variety of people. I actually did wait until the leaves fell so that I could get good pictures, and I'm glad I did, because by the time the massing was constructed, the trees had filled in and they were very difficult to see. The isometric on the far left indicates where the buckets were meant to indicate. And if we go to the next slide, this was taken when the buckets were in place. And you can see that on the far right is when the buckets were in place. The middle is when the massing mock-up was done. And then the picture on the far left is again when the buckets were in place. The 2 photos above are from Flatbush Avenue, where you can see the back of the building. They were also taken when the buckets were in place. So the only thing that you can see from any of the thoroughfares is the railing on the second floor, that corner of the railing. Where are we? So this is some historic stuff. That when the owner first approached me, I lived in the Prospect Heights neighborhood for about 35 years, so I was familiar with Park Slope. And these were the buildings that jumped out at me as far as how to combine the notion of masonry and steel and partial widths and full widths and things of that sort. Particularly the 2 on the upper section, I was familiar with them, and I thought this is where I wanted to go with it. And then these are additions that have all been, since Park Slope has been designated an historic district, And they have a much more modern flair to their addition. And that was also in my brain as a way of sort of combining both ideas at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, let's see if we have any public testimony. All right, there is nobody in the room to speak, so I'll turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one attendee with a raised hand, that being Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds the bulk and massing of the proposed addition to be appropriate, but feels the masonry detailing needs further refinement. In particular, the applicant should take a consistent approach to detailing the sills and lintels. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised, so I will just note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 6 recommends approval. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, great. Thank you, Gregory. All right, would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
I'm not sure I understand it fully, but my intention was that the addition would be very modern in its detailing, so it really doesn't have either lintels or sills, because I see them as being much more of the historic nature of the building as opposed to the more modern nature of the addition.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I think the comments were largely supportive in terms of the approach and the massing and the height. So thank you for responding on the details. All right, if there are no final questions, commissioners. Oh, yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
Curious question. From the existing building to this new addition is 25 feet, is it?
No, the building itself is 18 foot 3.5 inches wide. Oh. The addition itself is 18 foot 3.5 inches wide. And 8 feet deep. That's the 2-story section. And then the extension from that is another 10 foot square, more or less.
So the total is.
Let's say again,
the total
square footage.
Yeah. Extension.
I know. I think.
The total is.
I think the drawing said 16,
20 feet, something.
But let's go back to your plan because I think it says less actually. I think it's 8 and 8. 8 and 8 something. Not the plan.
18 foot 3.5 is the total distance.
Yeah.
From the existing proposed. And that includes the 8 foot of the 2-story addition and then the other 8 foot 3.5 of the.
I got confused last night. I had 14 feet, 16 feet. So I was totally confused. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And no other final questions? Oh, yes. No? Okay. All right, Commissioner Goldberg, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Brand, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And this is a sort of a triangular shaped lot, and it doesn't really have a traditional donut. It has larger buildings along Flatbush Avenue, and then these flats buildings on Sterling and then some buildings facing 7th Avenue. And the proposal is to do this, as we saw, a 2-story rear yard addition that is, the addition itself really isn't visible, but there's a tiny glimpse of the fence as we understand it. And it's in the context of some other rear yard additions. And applicant has also presented us some models that inspired the design. So Commissioner Chen, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward, largely invisible, and given the context of the neighbors, I think this is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Brand?
I agree. This is a modest addition compared to what we often see, and I think it's very related to the building. Altogether appropriate.
Commissioner Lotfi?
Agree as well, it's appropriate.
Commissioner Jefferson?
A combination of different exterior spaces. Appropriate.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Master,
Appropriate.
Commissioner Chapin,
Thank you. Appropriate.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Agreed. I think they should go look with staff at the windows on their little cellar level additional basin, probably close to the kind of yearly position. There's the position of the window. Position of the windows on the lower level, they just seem like really oddly located, but it's a minor issue. They can work with staff.
And it could be, I think,
To the wall once, it's just a weird.
yeah,
It's
sometimes we'll have to see if the rendering is a little off, but I also think they're going to be really concealed by the garden wall.
I'm not, it's just a minor comment.
Something to think about. Okay.
No big.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Appropriate.
Okay. Okay, so we've made it around the table. I think we have a consensus. They can certainly explore those windows on their basement level if they're interested, but I think we can move it to recommend approval today.
In the matter of LPC 23-01174, 147 Sterling Place, Park Slope Historic District. The application is to construct a rear yard addition, noting the building style, scale, materials, and details of the building among the features that contribute to the special architectural historic character of the Park Slope Historic District Extension Number 2. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed rear yard addition will not be visible from a public thoroughfare, that the rear yard addition will not rise to the full height of the building, and the top 2 floors will be retained, thereby preserving the building's relationship to other buildings in the road, that the proportion of the proposed rear yard addition will align with the adjacent 1-story rear addition, and that the remainder will only project modestly further into the rear yard within a donut that is small and irregularly shaped, and in this context will not diminish a unified central green space, that the rear yard addition will feature brick cladding and punch windows and will be in keeping with the material, scale, and character of this and other houses on the block, and that the proposed work will not diminish the special architectural historic character of the building or the Park Slope Historic District Extension Number 2.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you very much. All right, so that concludes our day today, July 11th, 2023. I'm going to thank you, commissioners, for your time and thought and dedication as always. And thanks to all of the public who participated today. And we'll see you all next Tuesday.